What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and today we're going to talk about a deck that a bunch of really persistent people have been on me to do for a while now. So here it is, guys. We're finally going to do Construct Tribal today, but if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. We built this deck to be like really competitive, but don't worry, if the price tag ends up being too much for you, I'm going to have some ways towards the end of the video to make this deck a lot more budget. But for now, let's go ahead and get into it. Here's Construct Tribal. You know, the first thing that struck me when I went to Gatherer and just searched for constructs in Standard is how many constructs are kind of all-stars in this meta, or at least have been all-stars at some point or another. Case in point, bam, Walking Ballista, right there. This card is awesome. Walking Ballista is still awesome in this format. It's been awesome the whole time it's been around, you know. It was just in Pro Tour Ixalan winning deck, Sultai Energy. And yeah, it's got some tricks in that deck with like the snake, but we've got a lot of tricks in this deck with Ballista too. But even like synergy aside, Walking Ballista is just a generically good magic card, you know. In the early game, it'll come down and kill like Champion of Wits and Glintsleeve Siphoner, Earthshaker Kenra, and actually kind of a lot of other stuff in the meta right now. And in the late game, obviously, it'll just come down all huge, like rah, and just like needle the opponent to death. And we've got a couple of ways in this deck of getting like the same copy of Walking Ballista back over and over from our graveyard, and that can close out a game really quick. Another awesome construct that sees a lot of play in this format, in one deck specifically, but still sees a lot of play, is Bomat Courier, which we're going to port over from Ramanap Red. Well, Bomat Courier doesn't look like much, but it's actually really, really important as a mid-game refill some of the time, you know. We're ostensibly a mid-range deck, but we don't have, like, the same kind of card advantage engines that a lot of mid-range decks in this format have. Like, even Temur Energy has, like, Rogue Refiner, a couple of other pieces, you know, but we really don't have a whole lot in that department because we're a black-red deck. We just don't really have a lot of options. So, Bomat Courier is great in any time in the mid-game where you can get 2, sometimes 3 cards out of him, depending on how long he's been out. And he leads to some pretty good starts, too. I mean, Bomat Courier's no slouch in that department. He'll knock 3 life off of our opponent in just a few quick turns at the beginning of the game. So there's a lot of reasons to play Bomat Courier, but really, really don't discount the ability to just discard him and grab 3 cards from exile. Like, that's unbelievable sometimes on turn 5 or 6 when you're starting to run low in the tank. Another construct that's seen a lot of play in this format, maybe not as of late, but it has seen a lot of play over the past couple of years, is Scrapheap Scrounger, which we're going to play a 4 of here too. Well, it's definitely good for bug and control decks if you've got a lot of control at your FNM, and I've had a lot of people write me and tell me in the comments section that control is a force at their FNM, even if it isn't sort of on the big stage right now. A lot of people are playing control at FNM, and Scrapheap Scrounger has always been a beast against control decks. I don't necessarily like that it like can't block, you know. It could be a little bit better against Energy, and it could be better against Ramanap Red, but even against Energy, sometimes, especially if you're on the play, it'll get in 6 quick damage for you and just keep bugging them for the rest of the game. So Scrapheap Scrounger is almost never bad, although when we go to sideboard against aggro, it will come out. But in the control matchup, serious all-star. We're also going to play a playset of Metallic Mimic in the deck. Not a construct, really, but as soon as it hits the battlefield, it is, you know. And multiple copies of it are insane, so we'll play all 4. Really, really dirty interaction with Walking Ballista when you name construct. That's good. And we've got, like, here's another thing, a few too many creatures in a mid-range deck especially that can die to a Shock or a Magma Spray, and this can take them out of that range. And, you know, just another card that's generically good. Ekes out a lot of advantage over long games. Just Metallic Mimic is too good to not play, especially in a mostly artifacts deck. While we're having this conversation about 2-drops, I might as well go ahead and tell you about the 2 copies of Heart of Kirin in the deck. It's not technically a creature, but it is. You know, we've gone out of our way, even though we didn't have to go that far out of our way to crew this in the deck. We've got like 10 different creatures that can crew it as early as turn 3, you know. Really, really dangerous card, you know. It contributes to like really awesome starts sometimes, and it's a good top deck too, you know, especially on clogged boards where there's really not much going on. It's a ground game. Heart of Kirin can come down, get crewed super easy, and just put a really fast clock on the opponent that they have to answer. Now, pretty much every creature I've talked about up to now has seen, like, massive amounts of play in Standard, you know. Now, the rest of the creatures in the deck have not, but they're still, like, kind of the best creatures in the deck because we're playing constructs. So, we'll go ahead and start with 4 copies of Chief of the Foundry. Obviously dumb. Well, 3-mana Anthem effect is exactly what we want. It goes really well with the buff from Metallic Mimic, makes our dudes pretty huge, and multiple copies of Chief is crazy too, you know. We've got a way of casting 2 Chief of the Foundries on turn 4 in this deck, which is particularly dirty, you know. There's so many awesome things about Chief of the Foundry. We're playing constructs, guaranteed 4 of, no questions asked. But since we've got 27 different artifacts in this deck, I think we should probably play 4 copies of Foundry Inspector, especially considering it too is a construct, and it crews Heart of Kiran too. There's a lot of good things about this card. And this is how we can get 2 Chief of the Foundry sometimes on turn 4. That's an awesome sequence. You know, turn 3 Inspector, and then turn 4 2 Chiefs. And there's a lot of dirty stuff that you can do on turn 4 following a turn 3 Foundry Inspector. It's also decent with Walking Ballista. Like, I didn't even know this when I started researching this deck, but apparently there's a deck in Vintage that uses Foundry Inspector and Walking Ballista as, like, key pieces, and they're really good together, you know. So, I learned something in researching this deck. So, if it's good enough for Vintage, that interaction is definitely good enough for Standard. And to finish off the creatures, we're just going to play 2 copies of Scrap Trawler here. You know, we started off with like 4, went down to 3, but I think 2 is actually the right number. It's a little more narrow than I originally thought, but it does allow for some pretty ridiculous tricks, especially with Walking Ballista. Like, if anything goes to the graveyard, you get your Walking Ballista back, and just that is reason enough for it to be in the deck. That's really stupid, but, you know, it's also good with a bunch of other stuff that we're doing. Well, Trawler's just really good at eking out a lot of advantage over a long game. You know, that's another reason it's good with Walking Ballista. But I've already talked about Walking Ballista. It's also good for just putting our opponent into, like, really weird spots, you know, where if they kill our Chief of the Foundry, then we get our Heart of Kiran back, or we get our Metallic Mimic back, you know. And if we get our Heart of Kiran back, we can just get Scrapheap Scrounger back from the graveyard, crew the hearts, start coming for their face. So it puts them in really awkward situations where they have to kill your Scrap Trawler before they can kill almost anything else on the battlefield, or you'll get your Walking Ballista back, and they really, really don't want that, you know. So that's another good thing about it is that, again, they have to answer it, or you'll just start generating a bunch of advantage. They cannot have that. So in that way, it also draws aggro off of all of our other creatures. You know, they got to deal with Scrap Trawler before they kill anything else. So, and on top of all of that, it also crews Heart of Kiran. So just yes to all of that. Scrap Trawler's awesome. Now, we're playing 10 other spells in this deck, and most of them are removal, and they're pretty widely known pieces, so I feel like I can just breeze through these real quick for you. We're going to play 3 copies of all of these: Fatal Push, Abrade, and Unlicensed Disintegration. Self-explanatory for the most part, you know. In these colors, we get a really good removal package. Fatal Push allows us to blow away stuff in the early game so we don't get run over while we're trying to get set up, you know. Ramonap Red has a lot of really low stuff on the curve, and we want to be able to blow that away. And Long Tusk Cub, for that matter, is an awesome target for a Fatal Push in this deck. So we'll do that. And Abrade, we can stretch, you know. We can kill Godfarer's Gift with this and any other problem artifacts, plus a bunch of stuff that comes down to the early game. And in Energy, we can kill Rogue Refiner, we can kill, you know, Whirler Virtuoso. There's a bunch of stuff that we can do with an Abrade in the Energy matchup. So Abrade is a really important removal spell. At first I was playing Lightning Strike, but honestly I think it's much more important to be able to stretch it to kill artifacts that would otherwise be busted against us, like Godfarer's Gift, than it is to deal damage to the face. That being said, though, we're definitely going to play Unlicensed Disintegration. You know, a Bolt and a Terminate is a really, really good deal, especially in this format, where it's a great answer to stuff like Glorybringer. And even though it doesn't permanently answer Scarab God, it doesn't answer Hazaret at all, it still has plenty of good targets in this format. Unconditional removal is always good, and it's really good reach for that matter too. So I wouldn't be caught dead playing less than 3. I know some people are a little cold on Unlicensed right now, but it's still, I promise you, a really effective piece of removal that finds a target every time you play it, and it's instant speed. And to finish off the main deck, we're just going to play 1 copy of Chandra, Torch of Defiance. You know, there's really no actual synergy here, but again, we're trying to make this deck competitive, and Chandra's just too good to be ignored. And in this deck, she's a great top end, you know. We don't really have much besides technically Walking Ballista that'll cost us 4 mana, you know. So by the time we're starting to run out of gas in the tank, Chandra can come down, get us a card a turn. That's really, really relevant. Or she can just blow dudes away, equally relevant, you know. Ramping is sometimes important, and if we ever actually get to her ultimate, game over. But I'm not that worried about the ultimate. We're mostly just going to get advantage, you know, card advantage out of this card, and sometimes blow a guy or 2 away with it. And honestly, just that kind of versatility is just too good. We'll play at least 1 Chandra because, again, we're a mid-range deck, and this is just the quintessential, or one of the quintessential mid-range cards in the format. I think Chandra's still like in the top 5, if not the top 5, in the top 10 cards in the entire meta, so we got to make room for her. Here's your lands right here. We got 23 of them. We're a little bit more at liberty to play colorless lands, you know, so that allows us to play a couple of main deck copies of Scavenger Grounds. That can be important, and yeah, it kind of blanks things like Scrap Trawler and Scrapheap Scrounger. It's a little at odds with what the deck is doing, but it will be worth it against Godfar's Gift and even the Scarab God sometimes. So I'm going to run a couple of main deck copies of that. Inventor's Fair is obviously awesome in a deck with 20 plus artifacts, and this can go get a Scrap Trawler or a Walking Ballista when we need it to. It's just absolutely invaluable, you know. And I also want to point out, while we're still here, the Canyon Slough. Canyon Slough is awesome, you know. Between Bomat Courier, Chandra, and this, we don't necessarily have a whole lot of ways of drawing or filtering cards in the deck, but this does give us an extra 4 ways of doing that, which can be really important in what is, again, a mid-range deck that needs ways of doing it. If we draw a land blank in the late game and we already have like 6 lands out, we really don't need more. The ability to draw a card is sometimes just busted. I'll say it, you know. Being able to just filter a bad draw is very, very important in the late game. Now here's our sideboard right here. We're doing a good bit against aggro out of our board because we really just don't want to get run over or, you know, caught off guard by really, really fast aggressive starts. So we've got that 4th Fatal Push. You know, we've got another copy of a Braid in the deck if we need it. We also stretch that into the combo matchup. We've got Aethersphere Harvester, ridiculous against aggro. And there's even things like Vraska's Contempt to kill their Hazoret. That's our only actual answer to Hazoret in the 75. It will come in against aggro. And then even Noxious Gearhulk, if you feel like you're going to get to it, but Noxious Gearhulk stretches into the mid-range matchup too. Speaking of the mid-range matchup, I essentially mean the energy matchup. And we've got Chandra's Defeat there to kill things like Whirler Virtuoso and Glorybringer, and also other Chandras, which is also just really important. You can get a lot of, like, essentially mana advantage out of this card. Just 1 mana to kill a 4-mana Planeswalker or a 5-mana creature is an unbelievable deal, and it's really, really good against energy. For that matter, it's obviously really, really good against Ramanap Red decks, too, so it's another card that will try to squeeze in against aggro decks. Against control, we've already got things like Scrapheap Scrounger and Scrap Trawler in the main deck to really, really make them have a bad time, but we're also going to add 4 Duress in the sideboard because it's just a ridiculously strong 10-cent card right now in the control matchup. And finally, that Pia Nalar will also come in against Synergy. I think it's nice to have another mana sink besides just Walking Ballista in the deck to break stalemates in that deck. It interacts really, really well with Scrap Trawler. Like really, really well with Scrap Trawler. And it can just get dudes through or just pump like any guy that we needed to add instant speed. Pia Nalar definitely makes a case for the main deck, but I think she's just specifically good against the energy decks, and so I'm going to relegate her to the sideboard. But you don't necessarily have to. This is where I want to talk a little bit about some budget options this deck has, because it definitely has kind of a lot of them. Before we move on to the power rankings here. And Pia Nalar is definitely one of them. You know, I'm just going to talk about her for another second here, but I've already mentioned all the, you know, the broad strokes and all the incredible stuff she does. But her interaction with Scrap Trawler is so good that if you only had a few bucks to build this deck, she's like 20-25 cents a piece on TCG Player right now, and she's just absolutely stupid in the right situations with Scrap Trawler. So she's definitely worth a look if you've got a few less dollars to build this deck with. It also kind of keeps me up at night sometimes that Built to Smash didn't make it into the competitive deck. Honestly, I think that removal pieces are more important to play than Built to Smash, but if you were going budget with the deck and you can't afford Fatal Push or any other pieces that we're playing, Built to Smash is definitely worthy of consideration. This is a disgusting combat trick. There's other stuff you could replace, you know, Metallic Mimic is a pretty penny right now, and Eager Construct is another 2-drop, 2-power construct that benefits our opponent a little bit, but it benefits us at the same time. And if we're digging for specific cards like Chief of the Foundry or whatever, then this helps us get there a little bit faster. You know, Eager Construct, not the best thing in the world, but it's 5 cents. So if you don't have Metallic Mimics and you're not interested in making the investment, Eager Construct goes pretty well in that 2-drop slot. If you don't have the $10 for Walking Ballista, it's essentially the most expensive card next to Chandra in the entire deck. And for that matter, if you didn't want to spend $30 on Chandra, another good 4-drop to consider is Treasure Keeper. I always want to call this card Trapper Keeper. But Treasure Keeper is actually kind of insane looking, you know what I mean? Like, this is another way to generate value and card advantage, or card filtering in a way, that this deck does not have otherwise. So I'd be really interested in trying out Treasure Keeper if we didn't have some of those bigger ticket cards. I should also at least briefly mention the fact that Metalwork Colossus is a construct, so that's hilarious. And it's like the lowest it's been in a while. It's only like 35 cents right now, and it is possible to cast in this deck. You know, most of our artifacts are creatures, so it's not going to happen every day, but I at least should point out this is a construct. That seems hilarious. And finally, you can just play more Gear Hulks. You know, I've only got the one Noxious in the sideboard there, and I know some people are probably going to get me on that and ask me why not more in the main deck. It just costs an awful lot, and this is a mid-range deck. This is a mid-range deck, but we're only playing the 23 lands, and Foundry Inspector does bring down the cost, but I still just didn't think it was worth playing multiple copies of 6 drops in our deck, but at least in this version. But if you are building more budget right now, Noxious Gear Hulk's only like $2.75, and Combustible Gear Hulk's like $1.50, $1.75, and these are actually really, really powerful cards if you can get to them. So they're probably worth taking a look at if you're building this deck for, you know, $30 to $50. But we've made it to the power rankings. Here they are right here. A final score of 66. Not too shabby, although the deck is right around $200 on TCG Player. You can get it for as low as like $170, but it's going to cost you just north of $200 at market price, which actually isn't too bad because the deck does succeed in being pretty competitive, you know? If you read between the lines, especially after you board in those Aethersphere Harvesters, this is essentially a lot like a Black-Red Vehicles deck. It's somewhat reminiscent to Mardu Vehicles from a couple, a year ago, except it doesn't obviously have things like Toolcraft Exemplar or Thraben Inspector and stuff, but it is a more mid-rangey version of a sort of Mardu Vehicles deck. But that's not to say the deck isn't capable of fast starts. You know, turn 1 Bomat Courier, turn 2 Heart of Kiran, into, say, turn 3 Scrapheap Scrounger, Fatal Push your guy, crew the Heart of Kiran, is a really, really good start that'll open up a lot of games for you, get them down to 10 before they know it. And then you've really got some breathing room while they're on their back foot. You can blow away their guys and just keep your Heart of Kiran safe, you know. There's a lot of different avenues this deck can pursue, and it really depends on the start you get and what you're playing against, which of those streets you want to go down. But the deck does have a lot of different ways to approach a game. Try this one out if you haven't yet, and give me your ideas for Black-Red Construct Tribal, because I didn't know before I started researching this deck how popular of a concept this appears to be in the standard right now. A lot of people are trying to make it work, and I'm really interested in your ideas. And if you did want to look at my list, at least, compare it to yours, whatever, just click the first link in the description, and that'll take you over to TCG Player. They help keep the deck tests coming, so I hope that you'll visit them, check them out, and just clicking the link helps my channel. So do that for me if you would, and that helps you. You can see the deck all at one time instead of watching my fat head babble on for 15 minutes. So it helps everybody. Click the link. And with that, tapped out, I believe, for this one. Let me know how you felt about it in the comments section. If you enjoyed it, sincerely hope you did. Just click the like button, gives me warm fuzzies. Subscribe if you're new, you haven't seen my fat mouth before, or if you just haven't done it yet, do it, because again, I've been saying this, but I mean it. 11th hour, Rivals of Ixalan spoilers coming super duper soon. You don't want to miss that. Click the bell for the notifications. Follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev, or throw me $1 of your, admittedly hard-earned money on the patreon.com, patreon.com/SBMTG, if you want to help keep the lights on around here. But that's it for Construct Tribal. I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love. Be kind.